Have you ever seen a dog uncover the truth that humans were too blind to see? This isn't just another courtroom drama. It's a story about instinct, innocence, and one German shepherd who refused to stay silent. A little girl broke down on the witness stand. The courtroom thought the case was over. But then, her police dog, Rex, did something no one expected, and it changed everything. If you've ever believed that animals can feel our pain, this story will prove it. Because sometimes, justice doesn't come from words. It comes from a heartbeat that never gives up. I've spent years studying real-life emotional stories about K9 heroes, how loyalty, courage, and unconditional love can turn tragedy into healing. And what I discovered will move you to your core. Stay with me until the end. Because you're not just going to watch a story today. You're going to feel it. You'll see what true loyalty looks like, and why the bond between humans and dogs might be the most powerful connection we'll ever know. This is when a police dog broke the silence of the courtroom. And trust me, you won't forget it. The rain came softly at first, thin streaks tracing down the courthouse windows, blurring the world outside into trembling lines of gray. The small town seemed to hold its breath. Only the muted echo of the clock tower marked time, each chime sinking into the quiet streets like a reminder that something irreversible was about to begin. Inside, a little girl pressed her forehead against the glass, her reflection rippling beneath the drizzle. Mina was 7. Too small to understand the weight of the arguments that had filled her home. Too old to believe her parents' smiles when they said, "Everything will be okay." Her mother sat a few seats away, eyes hollow, hands trembling as she clutched a folded document. The father stood across the hall, tall, silent, his face drawn in stone. Between them, the air was colder than the rain. And at the center of it all, 2 girls, Syra and Mina, clung to each other, fingers interlocked so tightly their knuckles turned white. Once their house had been full of laughter. Syra, 10 years old and fearless, had always been the protector, the one who built castles from pillows and whispered bedtime stories when thunder frightened Mina. Their mother would hum from the kitchen, and their father's voice would echo from the hallway, soft with affection. But those sounds had faded months ago. Arguments grew sharper, plates shattered, doors slammed, love turned into silence, a silence that lingered like dust, heavy and bitter. When the judge's verdict was announced, Mina didn't understand all the words, only that her sister's hand began to slip from hers. The mother had custody of Mina. The father would take Syra. "It's just for a while," her mother whispered, kneeling to brush Mina's hair aside. "You'll visit her, sweetheart. I promise." But promises feel thin when your world is breaking apart. Outside the courthouse, Syra crouched to meet Mina's eyes. "You'll be brave, okay? I'll call you every night. Pinky swear?" Her voice trembled despite the brave smile she tried to wear. Mina nodded, tears spilling onto her cheeks as their fingers intertwined one last time. Syra hugged her so tightly that Mina could feel her heartbeat, fast, scared, desperate. The rain grew heavier, turning the sidewalk into a blur of gray and silver. When Syra's father led her away, Mina pressed her palms to the window of the car, watching the red taillights disappear into the mist. Days turned into weeks. Mina's mother tried to fill the silence with gentle words, new routines, and stories at bedtime. But every night, Mina would wait by the phone, her small fingers tracing the edge of the receiver. Sometimes Syra would call, her voice quiet, distant, as if she were speaking from underwater. "I'm okay," she'd say. "Daddy's just tired today." Other nights, there was no call at all. When Mina asked why, her mother would smile faintly, eyes avoiding hers. Maybe she's busy, love. But Mina knew something was wrong. She could hear it. The stiffness in Syra's voice, the way she said, "I'm okay," too quickly. Once, Syra whispered, "Don't tell Mom, but I miss you. I miss home." Then the line went dead. Time went on. Seasons shifted. The laughter that used to fill their home never returned. Time 100 mems. Mina grew quieter, her drawings darker, stick figures holding hands under gray skies. Her teacher noticed. Her mother tried to reassure her. "We'll visit soon." But visits kept getting postponed. The father always had reasons. Syra was at school, or she was tired, or the timing wasn't right. And each excuse carved another hollow inside Mina's heart. Then came that night. It was late autumn, the air sharp with the scent of rain and iron. Mina was in bed, hugging her stuffed bear, Syra's old toy, its fur worn thin from years of love. Her mother was on the phone in the next room, her voice trembling, words breaking into fragments. Mina couldn't hear them all, only pieces. Accident, hospital, Syra. Then a silence so deep, it seemed the whole house stopped breathing. Her mother burst into the room, face pale as snow. "Mina," she whispered, voice cracking. "Something happened to your sister." The words floated in the air, like shattered glass. Mina didn't move at first. She couldn't. Her hands clutched the bear tighter, her throat closing as if she were drowning. She's gone," her mother said finally, falling to her knees beside the bed. The rain outside roared louder, slamming against the windows like an angry ocean. Mina didn't cry right away. She just stared, unblinking, at the wall where the nightlight glowed softly. Her mother's sobs filled the room, but Mina heard nothing, only the echo of Syra's last call replaying in her head. "I miss you." Hours passed. The phone kept ringing. Voices of officers, relatives, people she didn't know. Mina stayed curled beneath the blanket, her little hands gripping the stuffed bear so tightly its seams began to split. "She promised," she whispered, over and over, her voice shaking. "She promised to visit." Her tears came then, hot, unstoppable, soaking the bear's fur, dripping onto her pillow. In the dim light, the stuffed animal seemed to stare back at her, its button eyes glistening with the same sorrow she couldn't put into words. She pressed it to her chest and whispered Syra's name again and again, until exhaustion finally pulled her into a restless sleep. Outside, the rain didn't stop. The world seemed to mourn with her. Streetlights blurred into halos, thunder murmured in the distance. In that tiny house beneath the rhythm of falling water, a mother sat by her child's bedside, her face buried in her hands. And on the floor by the door, the stuffed bear lay where Mina had dropped it, a silent witness to the moment when innocence shattered. From that night on, nothing would ever be the same. The town would speak in whispers. The mother would search for answers. And Mina would carry the echo of her sister's voice, like a shadow she could never escape. But in that silence, that deep, aching silence, something else waited to rise. And far away, in a police station lit by flickering fluorescent light, a German shepherd named Rex would soon hear the first call that would change everything. The morning after Syra's death felt unreal, as if the world itself had turned to glass. Every sound was sharper, every breath heavier. The small house was still filled with the scent of rain and grief. The mother sat in the living room, surrounded by photographs she couldn't bear to look at. Her trembling hands kept folding and unfolding a crumpled police report, the ink already smudged by her tears. She hadn't slept. She hadn't eaten. All night she had replayed the same thought. Something wasn't right. The officers said it looked like an accident. But a mother's heart knows does when the truth doesn't fit. There had been too many bruises, too many excuses. And Mina, her little girl, had gone silent. Mina hadn't spoken since the news broke. She sat by the window, wrapped in a blanket too big for her, staring out at the gray morning. Her stuffed bear was in her lap, its fur damp from tears. The mother had tried to reach her, whispering gently, offering warm milk, touching her hair, but Mina just stared, unblinking. Her small fingers gripped the bear's paw until her knuckles went white. By afternoon, the mother couldn't bear the silence any longer. Desperation drove her to pick up the phone. She called an old friend, Officer Daniel Cruz, a veteran of the town's police force. Years ago, he'd helped her family through small troubles, lost pets, community disputes, back when her marriage still had laughter. When he answered, she broke down before she could even explain. Within an hour, a police cruiser stopped outside her house. Daniel stepped out, his uniform soaked from the drizzle, his face lined with quiet compassion. Beside him walked a large German shepherd, with dark, intelligent eyes and calm, measured steps. "This is Rex," Daniel said softly as he entered the living room. "He's one of our K-9s, trained for search and comfort work. He's good with children." The mother nodded weakly. Her eyes darted to the doorway where Mina sat, half hidden by the curtain. The little girl's gaze fixed on the dog, wide and wary. Rex stopped a few feet away, lowering himself slowly, his tail brushing the floor. He didn't move closer. He just waited. His breathing was steady, quiet, unthreatening. Minutes passed. Then Mina blinked. Something in the dog's stillness drew her in. She slid off the chair and took a hesitant step forward. Rex lifted his head slightly, but didn't move. Mina's small hand reached out, trembling, before resting on his fur. It was warm, alive. The dog didn't flinch, only turned his head slightly, meeting her eyes. For the first time in days, Mina's lips parted. Her mother froze, afraid to breathe. Then, in a voice barely louder than a whisper, Mina said, "He feels like Syra's blanket. Soft." Tears welled instantly in the mother's eyes. Officer Daniel's expression softened. "He's here for you," he said gently. "You can tell him anything. He doesn't tell secrets." Rex slowly laid his head on Mina's knee. The little girl's fingers began to move, stroking his ears with slow, careful motions. And then, as if a dam had broken, her words began to tumble out. Fragments at first, broken by sobs. She told them about the phone calls, about how Syra used to sound scared, about the shouting she heard one night through the phone, her father's voice, angry and sharp, about the crash. Then silence. Daniel exchanged a look with the mother, a look that said, "This changes everything." He opened his notebook quietly, writing down every word Mina remembered. When she stopped speaking, he didn't ask questions. He just said, "You were very brave to tell us." That evening, as the gray sky deepened into dusk, Daniel stepped outside to make a call. "We need to reopen the investigation," he said firmly into his radio. "There's possible new testimony from the sister." The mother stood at the doorway, her voice breaking. "You can't put her through more. She's just a child." Daniel looked at her with deep regret. "I'll do everything I can to protect her. But the court will need her statement. She's the only one who might have heard what really happened." The word court hung heavy in the air. The mother's knees buckled. She gripped the doorframe for balance. "She can't," she whispered. She can't sit in that room surrounded by those people. Rex will be there, Daniel said softly. He'll stay with her the whole time. Inside, Mina sat beside the dog, her small hand still buried in his fur. The soft rhythm of his breathing was the only sound in the room. She didn't understand what was happening, only that people whispered her sister's name like a wound that wouldn't heal. But when she looked at Rex, she saw something steady, something safe. His eyes held no judgment, no fear. Days passed. The court issued the official summons. Psychologists protested, claiming a child so young shouldn't testify. But the prosecution insisted. Her words could expose the truth behind Syra's death. The mother signed the papers with shaking hands, tears blurring the ink. The night before the hearing, Mina couldn't sleep. She sat on the couch, staring at the moon through the window. Rex lay beside her, his head on his paws. She whispered to him, voice trembling. They'll ask me about Syra. But what if I forget something? What if they think I'm lying? The dog lifted his head, his eyes meeting hers. He didn't make a sound, but the warmth in his gaze seemed to tell her, you won't be alone. At dawn, the courthouse loomed before them, tall, gray, merciless. The air was cold enough to sting. Mina wore a small black dress, her hair tied in ribbons that once belonged to Syra. Her mother held her hand tightly as they climbed the steps, but Mina's gaze was fixed on Rex. The German shepherd walked beside her in perfect silence, his leash held loosely by Officer Daniel. Each step echoed on the marble stairs, the sound swallowed by the wind. When they reached the top, Mina stopped. The courthouse doors stood before her, enormous, heavy, indifferent. She took a deep breath, her chest rising and falling beneath her coat. Then she crouched down and wrapped her arms around Rex's neck. Promise you'll stay, she whispered. Rex pressed his head against her shoulder, tail giving one slow wag. Behind her, her mother wiped away tears she didn't want her daughter to see. The officer placed a hand on her shoulder and nodded toward the doors. And so, with one final breath, Mina took the first step inside, her small figure dwarfed by the cold concrete pillars. The rain began again, soft and steady, washing over the courthouse steps like the world itself was holding its breath. None of them knew what awaited beyond those doors. But one thing was certain: justice, grief, and truth were about to meet in a way no one could have predicted. And somewhere, deep inside the echoing halls, a loyal dog's heart beat steadily, ready to stand guard over a child who carried more courage than anyone could see. The courthouse was colder that morning, not from weather, but from tension. Every step echoed too loudly. Every whisper seemed to hang in the air like dust that refused to settle. Rows of reporters filled the benches, cameras lowered but ready, pens poised above notebooks. The trial that had gripped the small town for weeks was about to reach its most fragile moment. At the far end of the room, the father sat motionless. His suit was pressed, his hair neatly combed, but his eyes were vacant, the kind of emptiness that didn't come from grief, but from calculation. Across from him, the mother trembled behind her lawyer, her face pale, her hands twisted in her lap. She looked at the door every few seconds, waiting for the only person whose words could uncover the truth and possibly shatter her heart all over again. The heavy wooden doors opened. Every head turned. Mina stepped inside, a small figure swallowed by the vastness of the courtroom. Her black shoes clicked faintly on the marble floor. In her hand she held a small pendant, a silver charm shaped like a crescent moon. It had once belonged to her sister, Syra. She gripped it so tightly that her fingertips were white. Behind her walked Officer Daniel and Rex, the German shepherd. The dog wasn't allowed past the entryway. Daniel led him to a quiet spot outside the courtroom door, where Rex sat obediently, tail curled around his paws. He watched Mina go with eyes that seemed to understand far more than they should. Inside, the judge nodded solemnly. "You may be seated, Miss Mina." She nodded, barely, and climbed onto the witness chair, her legs too short to touch the floor. The courtroom's silence felt like a physical weight pressing against her chest. She could hear every breath, every rustle of paper, every nervous cough. The prosecutor, a kind-faced woman, leaned forward. "Mina," she began softly, her tone like a whisper meant for a frightened child. "Do you remember why you're here today?" Mina nodded again, her voice almost inaudible. "To talk about Syra." The mother's shoulders shook silently. The prosecutor continued gently. "You can take your time, sweetheart. We just want to know what you remember. Did Syra ever talk to you about being afraid?" A pause. Mina's small hands twisted the pendant chain. "Sometimes," she said. She said Daddy got angry, but she said he didn't mean it." The courtroom stirred. A few muffled gasps, a hiss of whispers. The prosecutor's voice softened even more. "Did you ever hear anything, Mina? On the phone, maybe?" "Yes," Mina whispered. "I heard shouting. Something fell. Then she cried. Then nothing." The mother buried her face in her hands. The judge raised a hand for silence. But then, like a sudden crack in glass, the defense attorney rose. He was sharp, precise, every movement deliberate. His tone was firm, but under the politeness lurked a blade. "Miss Mina," he said, leaning slightly forward, "you love your mother very much, don't you?" Mina blinked, unsure. "Yes." "And your mother has been very sad, hasn't she? She told you Syra's death wasn't your father's fault, right?" "Kilo 600 Melson." The prosecutor objected, but the judge allowed the question to stand. The defense attorney smiled thinly. "Tell me, did your mother ever suggest what you should say today?" The words hit like thunder. Mina's eyes widened. She looked from him to her mother, who shook her head desperately. "No," Mina whispered. The attorney's smile didn't fade. "You're sure? You're not just trying to make her happy? To make someone proud?" Her small hands began to tremble. "No, He took a slow step closer, lowering his voice. "You're a little girl. You might not remember everything correctly. Maybe you just think you heard something. Maybe it was a dream." Mina's lips quivered. She gripped the pendant until the edge dug into her palm. "It wasn't a dream," she said, her voice breaking. The attorney raised an eyebrow. "And yet, you have no proof, do you? Only your words." Tears welled in her eyes. The room seemed to tilt. The ceiling lights were too bright. The faces around her, some blur of eyes, hundreds of them watching, judging. "Answer the question," the attorney pressed, his tone suddenly hard. "Did your mother tell you what to say?" Mina's breath hitched. The air around her felt too thin. Her chest rose and fell rapidly. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Her gaze darted to her mother, blurred by tears. The room grew restless. Chairs creaked, whispers flitted through the air like insects. The judge lifted a hand for order, but the tension wouldn't settle. Outside in the hallway, Rex sat still. Ears pricked, muscles taut. He could sense it. The panic, the distress of the little girl he'd been sent to protect. His low whine echoed softly through the corridor, a sound more human than animal. Inside, Mina's small shoulders trembled. Her fingers fidgeted with the pendant, twisting the chain until it nearly snapped. "I don't," she stammered, voice fading. "I don't know what to say." The defense attorney crossed his arms, turning toward the jury. "No further questions." The prosecutor stepped forward quickly, trying to comfort her. "You've done wonderfully, Mina," she said softly. But the girl's eyes were fixed on the floor. The judge's gavel struck once, sharp and final. "The court will take a brief recess." As the room erupted into murmurs, Mina sat frozen in her chair, a child lost amid giants. The weight of hundreds of stares pressed down on her, and for a moment, she looked as if she might disappear beneath it all. Outside, Rex's soft whines grew louder. The guard at the door frowned, trying to hush him, but the dog refused to move. His body was rigid, ears forward, eyes fixed on the wooden door that separated him from Mina. He couldn't see her, but he knew. Inside the courtroom, Mina finally turned toward the sound, faint but familiar. Her tear-streaked face lifted, her lips parting as if she could hear him through the walls. The mother saw it too. That fragile connection, invisible but unbreakable, between a terrified child and the one creature who could still make her feel safe. The judge noticed the dog's persistent whine and gave a small nod to the bailiff. "Let him stay nearby," he said quietly. "The child may need that comfort." The courtroom began to empty slowly for recess. Reporters filed out, murmuring headlines under their breath. The father didn't move. He sat there, staring at the space his daughter had occupied, his eyes cold, his jaw tight. For the first time, a shadow of unease flickered across his face. Mina wiped her tears with the back of her hand, her breathing still unsteady. And through the thin crack of the courtroom door, she could see a pair of amber eyes waiting, patient, loyal, and steady. Rex gave a single, low sound. Not quite a bark, more like a whisper of reassurance. And for the first time since she entered that room, Mina closed her eyes and breathed. The recess was short, too short. The murmurs of reporters and the clatter of footsteps still echoed faintly as the courtroom filled again. The air had shifted, heavier now, colder. Mina sat back in the witness chair, her small frame swallowed by its size. Her hands were clasped tightly in her lap, the little pendant still tangled around her fingers. The chain had cut a faint red mark across her skin, but she didn't seem to notice. The judge returned, adjusting his glasses. "We will resume the questioning," he said. His voice carried through the hall, steady and formal, but even he seemed uneasy. Across the room, the defense attorney stood once more. His tone was sharper now, the patience he had worn earlier replaced with precision and quiet cruelty. "Miss Mina," he began, stepping closer. "Earlier, you said you heard shouting on the night your sister died. But you didn't see anything, did you?" Mina's eyes flickered. "No, I only heard." "Then you can't say for certain what happened, can you?" Her voice trembled. "No, but—" He cut her off. "You can't say your father hurt Syra. You don't know, correct?" She opened her mouth to answer, but the words tangled in her throat. The prosecutor rose to object, but the judge motioned for her to let the child respond. Mina lowered her gaze. "I don't know," she whispered. The defense attorney took another step forward, his shoes clicking against the marble floor. "Then why tell the court your father was angry? Why suggest he did something wrong?" "I didn't. Someone told you to say that," he pressed, his voice cold. "Was it your mother?" The mother gasped from her seat, her lawyer reaching to steady her arm. The prosecutor objected again, louder this time, but the damage was done. The words hung in the air like poison. Mina's breathing grew shallow. Her small fingers clenched around the pendant, twisting it until the metal edge bit into her palm. A bead of blood appeared, bright red against pale skin. "Did your mother tell you what to say, Mina?" Her lips trembled. "No." "Think carefully," the attorney said, lowering his voice, his tone suddenly coaxing. "You're scared, aren't you? Scared to tell the truth." Tears filled her eyes. "I am telling the truth," she cried softly. He leaned closer, his shadow falling over her. "Then tell us again. Did your father ever hurt Syra?" The words seemed to echo endlessly, bouncing off the walls until even the spectators stopped breathing. Mina's hands shook violently. She tried to speak, but her throat closed. All at once, her vision blurred. The faces in the courtroom melted together into a swirl of black suits, pale lights, and staring eyes. "Answer me!" the attorney barked, slamming his hand against the witness stand. The sound cracked through the air like thunder. Mina flinched so hard she nearly fell from the chair. The prosecutor shot up, shouting, "Enough! She's just a child!" But it was too late. Mina's breathing came in ragged bursts, tears streaking down her cheeks. She clutched the pendant tighter, the chain now tangled, the charm digging deep into her palm until it cut the skin open. A thin line of blood dripped down her wrist. The defense attorney's voice thundered again. "You're lying, aren't you, Mina? You don't remember anything real. You're just repeating what someone told you." The gallery gasped. Reporters froze mid-scribble. Even the father, sitting motionless at the defense table, looked up, his eyes narrowing. Something inside Mina snapped. "I don't remember," she screamed, her voice echoing across the courtroom, high and broken. "Please stop, I don't remember." The words hit like a wave. The courtroom went silent, an aching, suffocating silence. Every face turned toward her, frozen in disbelief. The prosecutor's pen dropped from her hand. The judge leaned back in his chair, eyes downcast, his gavel hovering mid-air. The only sound left was Mina's sobbing, sharp, uneven breaths between gasps for air. Her small body shook violently. The pendant slipped from her fingers, clattering softly against the wooden floor. Then, from beyond the doors, a bark. Deep, resonant, echoing down the hallway. Once, twice, then again. Everyone turned. The bailiff opened the door slightly, revealing Rex straining against his leash. His fur bristled, eyes fixed on the courtroom. His low growl rumbled like thunder trapped inside his chest. The guard tried to hold him back, murmuring, "Easy, boy, easy." But Rex pulled harder, his claws scraping against the floor tiles. "Control that dog!" someone shouted. But Rex wouldn't stop. His bark grew louder, more urgent, not of aggression, but of warning, of protection. Each sound vibrated through the wooden walls, shaking the room with its raw power. Mina lifted her head at the sound. Her teary eyes darted toward the door. "Rex," she whispered, barely audible. The mother pressed her hands to her mouth, tears streaming freely now. The judge, visibly shaken, gestured toward the bailiff. "Take her out for a moment," he said quietly. Daniel rushed forward, his voice firm but gentle. "It's okay, sweetheart. Let's take a break, okay?" Mina nodded weakly, her body trembling. She tried to stand, but her legs gave way. Daniel caught her just before she hit the ground. The chain of the pendant slipped through his fingers, still streaked with blood. As he carried her toward the door, Rex's barking turned to a low whine. When she came into view, the dog stilled instantly, tail lowered, head tilted, eyes soft. He sniffed her hand, then gently pressed his nose against the small cut on her palm, as if to soothe it. The hallway fell silent. The echoes of his bark still lingered faintly, like the memory of thunder after a storm. Inside the courtroom, the judge finally struck the gavel. "This hearing will recess until further notice," he said, voice heavy with something that sounded almost like remorse. Reporters whispered frantically. Cameras flashed. But no one could shake the image of the little girl collapsing under the weight of words too heavy for her small shoulders, and the sound of a dog's bark breaking through the silence, as if he alone had understood her pain. Daniel guided Mina out of the building, her small hand gripping the fur around Rex's neck. Each step she took left faint traces of red on her palm, but she didn't cry anymore. She just walked, quiet, pale, eyes unfocused, her head leaning gently against the dog's side. Outside, the wind carried away the last echo of Rex's bark, scattering it through the courthouse courtyard like a prayer whispered to the sky. Rate slow. For a long moment, no one moved. Then, slowly, the clouds above broke apart, and a narrow band of light spilled down through the gray, falling across the courthouse steps, where a child, a mother, and a loyal German shepherd stood in the aftermath of truth too cruel for innocence to bear. The courtroom doors opened again after the recess, but the air felt different now, tight, uneasy, filled with the lingering echo of Mina's breakdown. Reporters whispered from the gallery, their pens scratching nervously against paper. The mother sat frozen in her seat, eyes red, fingers clutching a tissue that had long since lost its shape. Officer Daniel stood quietly near the door, one hand resting on Rex's collar. The German shepherd's ears twitched at every sound inside. His eyes never left Mina, who now sat at the side of the room with a blanket over her shoulders. She looked pale, exhausted, fingers trembling slightly as she toyed with the pendant around her neck. The judge entered, his robe swaying with solemn weight. "We will resume," he said, voice firm but cautious. "The witness is excused until further notice. We'll proceed with evidence review." The defense attorney straightened his tie. "Your Honor, I move that the child's testimony be stricken from record. It's emotionally compromised and inadmissible." "Denied," the judge said sharply. "We'll address that later. Continue." Daniel glanced down at Rex. The dog sat rigid, his gaze shifting toward the evidence table, a long, polished desk near the center of the room, covered with labeled bags and numbered tags. Among them lay a small, plastic-sealed exhibit, a plush bear, its fur gray and matted from dirt. A red ribbon still hung loosely around its neck. Syra's toy. Mina's eyes caught sight of it, and her breath hitched. She whispered, almost to herself, "That's Syra's bear." Daniel gave her a small nod, his expression gentle. "It's okay," he whispered. But Rex, he didn't look calm. His muscles tensed under Daniel's grip, his eyes locked on the stuffed toy, ears pricked forward, nostrils flaring, as if something about that scent stirred something deep inside him. "Easy, boy," Daniel murmured, tugging gently at the leash. "Stay." But Rex didn't stay. In an instant, swift and silent, he lunged forward. The leash slipped from Daniel's hand before he could react. The sound of claws against marble echoed sharply as Rex bolted straight toward the evidence table. "Rex, no!" Daniel shouted, sprinting after him. The courtroom erupted in chaos. Officers scrambled to block his path, but Rex was faster, powerful, unstoppable. He leapt onto the table, scattering papers and folders to the floor. His jaws clamped around the plastic evidence bag that held the toy bear. Gasps filled the room. Get that dog out of here! Someone yelled. But Rex didn't obey. With a low growl, he shook the bag violently, teeth tearing through the seal, plastic ripping apart like thin paper. The stuffed bear flew from his mouth, landing on the floor. He pounced again, tearing it open with precise, frantic motions, not wild but purposeful, like he knew something was inside. Daniel reached him just as a small object, a silver USB drive, rolled out from the shredded stuffing, clinking softly against the marble floor. Everything froze. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Even Rex stopped. His breathing slowed as he sat down beside the torn bear, head lowering slightly, eyes locked on the fallen drive. Then the whispers began. What is that? Was that inside the toy? Who put it there? Daniel crouched down, carefully picking up the small device with a gloved hand. He looked toward the judge. Your Honor, this wasn't logged in the evidence report. The prosecutor rose immediately, her expression pale with realization. It could be part of the original crime scene material. We need to secure it. The defense attorney stood as well, slamming his palm on the table. Objection! This is tampering. That animal contaminated critical evidence. Order! The judge barked. But the courtroom was already alive with shouts and flashes from reporters' cameras. Through the noise, a small voice broke through, trembling, clear, and heartbreakingly young. That's Syra's bear! Mina cried out, standing halfway from her seat. Her eyes were wide with tears. Daddy said she lost it. He said she dropped it at school. Her words hit the room like a gunshot. Every head turned toward her. The father's face drained of color. His hand twitched on the table, knuckles whitening. The prosecutor was the first to recover. Your Honor, I request the USB be examined immediately. The defense attorney shouted over her. This is outrageous! That evidence is destroyed! It's inadmissible! But no one was listening anymore. All eyes were on the small, torn bear lying at Rex's paws. The bright red ribbon, stained with dirt, fluttered slightly from the air conditioning vent above, a silent echo of the little girl who used to hold it every night. Daniel slowly approached Mina, who was now shaking uncontrollably. He knelt beside her. You did good, he whispered softly. You recognized it. That's important. Rex padded quietly over, sitting beside Mina once more. He looked up at her with calm, steady eyes, as if to tell her it was all right now, as if this was the reason he'd come. His tail brushed gently against her leg, grounding her amidst the chaos. The judge sighed heavily, rubbing his temple. We'll recess for 20 minutes while the evidence is examined. Bailiff, secure that drive in an official bag. Officer Cruz, keep your dog restrained, please. Daniel nodded, though his voice was still tight with disbelief. Yes, Your Honor. He clipped the leash back onto Rex's collar, giving it a firm hold. But even as he did, he couldn't shake the feeling that the dog's instincts had just uncovered something extraordinary, something no one else could have found. As the bailiff sealed the USB in a new evidence bag, a tense silence settled again. Mina sat very still, watching them handle the tiny device. Her voice trembled as she whispered, Syra used to hide her secrets in that bear. Daniel froze. What kind of secrets? She said Daddy didn't like when she used the computer, Mina murmured, eyes distant. So she said she'd keep her favorite things safe, in Mr. Fluff. The prosecutor's gaze darted toward the USB. Her voice dropped low. Then maybe Syra kept more than her favorite things in there. The judge's gavel struck once, calling for order again, but the air remained thick with realization and fear. Through it all, Rex sat still, eyes unwavering, head held high, He didn't bark or growl anymore. He just watched the USB, as if waiting for the truth it held to finally come to light. Outside, thunder rolled distantly across the horizon. Inside, the weight of what had just happened hung heavy, a storm brewing not in the sky but in the heart of the courtroom itself. And in that suspended silence, everyone understood. What the dog had torn open wasn't just a toy. It was the seam of a secret stitched shut by guilt, lies, and grief. The atmosphere inside the courtroom had shifted from tense to electric. The air itself seemed to vibrate, thick with anticipation, dread, and disbelief. Every eye followed the bailiff as he carried the small, sealed evidence bag containing the USB drive toward the technical desk at the front of the room. No one spoke. Even the defense attorney's protests had quieted into nervous murmurs. At the judge's command, an IT specialist from the police department was summoned. He was young, dark circles under his eyes, hands steady despite the weight of 100 stares. He placed the USB into a secure laptop, the soft click echoing through the chamber like a gunshot. The projector hummed to life. The courtroom lights dimmed. Shadows crept up the wooden walls, and the faces of the spectators flickered in the pale blue glow of the screen. Mina's heart pounded in her chest. Her small hands clutched Rex's fur tightly. The German shepherd sat beside her again, tail still, his warm breath steady against her trembling fingers. The specialist adjusted the volume, pressed a key, and the video began to play. At first, there was nothing, only static and a faint hiss. Then slowly, an image formed, a dimly lit bedroom. The recording was shaky, handheld. The camera pointed at a familiar figure, Syra. Her hair was messy, her cheeks streaked with tears. She looked no older than 10, but in that moment, she seemed years beyond her age. Gasps filled the courtroom. Mina's small cry broke through the silence. "That's her," she whispered. Syra looked straight into the camera, her lower lip trembling. "If you're watching this," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, "it means something bad happened." The mother gripped the armrest of her chair, knuckles white. The father's face remained stone, but his eyes flickered, just once. Syra sniffled, wiping her nose on her sleeve. "Daddy gets mad sometimes," she said softly. "He doesn't like when I talk back. But I didn't mean to make him angry." Her voice quivered. "I just wanted him to stop shouting." The defense attorney jumped to his feet. "Your Honor, this is hearsay, unverifiable. Sit down," the judge snapped, voice low and trembling. "Let it play." Syra looked around the room in the video, glancing at the door like she was afraid someone might come in. "I told Mina I'd keep my secrets safe," she whispered. "So I hid this in Mr. Fluff. Mommy said you can't hide truth forever. I just hope she's right." Her eyes darted back to the camera. "If something happens to me, it's because of—" The video cut out. A harsh burst of static filled the room. The screen went black. For a moment, time stopped. Then chaos erupted. Mina screamed, "No, no, make it play again!" Her tiny voice broke through the noise, raw and desperate. She lunged forward, but Daniel caught her, holding her tightly. "It's okay, sweetheart," he whispered, though his own voice trembled. "It's okay." The mother collapsed forward, a strangled sob escaping her lips. Her lawyer reached to steady her, but her body went limp, fainting in her chair. People rushed to her side, calling for water, for help. Across the aisle, the father's mask finally cracked. His face twisted, part anger, part fear. He slammed his fist on the table. "That doesn't prove anything. She could have been scared of anything." His voice shook, betraying more than he realized. The prosecutor stood, eyes blazing. It proves plenty. It proves that child feared her own father. Enough! The judge thundered, striking his gavel so hard it echoed like thunder. Silence! This instant! But the room was a storm. Reporters whispered furiously. Cameras clicked despite the restrictions, and the faint sound of the mother's sobs filled every gap between sentences. The IT specialist, pale and sweating, looked toward the judge. "Your Honor," he stammered. "The video file might have been damaged. I can attempt to recover the missing segment, but I'll need more time." "Do it," the judge ordered. "Immediately." He turned to the prosecutor and defense. "All other proceedings are suspended. This evidence will be reviewed in full." The gavel struck again. "Effective now." As the commotion continued, Mina sat still, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. Rex pressed closer, his head resting on her knee, his calm presence, the only steady thing in the room. She reached down, fingers trembling, and brushed his ear gently. "She was so scared," Mina whispered through broken sobs. "I knew it. I told them she was scared." Daniel crouched beside her, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You helped her, Mina. You brought her voice back." Her eyes lifted to the screen, where Syra's frozen image remained, her wide eyes staring out into the darkness. The glow of the projector cast a faint reflection across Mina's face, as if the two sisters were connected through that flickering light. Behind them, medics rushed to tend to the mother. The defense attorney argued in a frantic voice, demanding the video be deemed inadmissible, but the judge ignored him entirely. The weight of the revelation had already shifted everything. Rex lifted his head, amber eyes fixed on the black screen. The faint reflection of the static shimmered in his pupils. His ears twitched at every noise, the gavel, the murmurs, the shuffling feet, but he stayed unmoving, guarding Mina like a silent sentinel. The prosecutor spoke softly, almost reverently. "Sometimes," she said, "the truth finds its own way out, even if it won't claw its way through fur and stitches." The judge nodded solemnly. "Recess until further notice. We will reconvene once the recovered footage is ready." The sound of chairs scraping filled the air as people rose, still dazed. Mina didn't move. She kept her eyes on the darkened screen until Daniel gently led her away. Rex followed, his leash slack, his steps silent but purposeful. As they passed the evidence table, Mina's gaze fell once more on the shredded bear, its torn fabric spread open like a wound. "She was trying to tell me," Mina whispered. "Syra tried to tell me before." Daniel's chest tightened. "And now she finally has," he said quietly. They reached the courthouse hallway just as the rain began again, soft at first, then heavier, pounding against the tall windows. Mina turned toward the sound. For the first time since her sister's death, her tears stopped. She crouched down and wrapped her arms around Rex's neck, burying her face in his fur. The dog didn't move. He simply sat there, letting her cry into him as the world beyond the courthouse blurred into silver and gray. Inside the courtroom, the projector still glowed faintly against the wall, the last frame of Syra's frightened face flickering in the dark. It was a haunting reminder. That truth, no matter how long it's buried, always finds a way to speak, even if it takes the bark of a dog and the courage of a little girl to make the world listen. And as the doors closed behind them, the once silent courtroom trembled with emotion, the kind that changes everything, forever. The morning broke gray and cold, the courthouse wrapped in a fog that seemed to swallow sound. Even the reporters waiting outside spoke in whispers, their voices low, as if they feared disturbing something sacred or cursed. Inside, the atmosphere was heavy with what the night had revealed. The USB found inside Syra's bear had shaken the foundation of the entire case. Overnight, investigators had seized the father's laptop for analysis, suspecting that the missing piece of Syra's video, the moment cut off, might be linked to files on his device. Now, as the courtroom filled again, all eyes were on the forensic expert who stood at the front, a stack of folders and a laptop balanced in his arms. He looked nervous, aware that his next few sentences might alter the course of many lives. The judge entered, his robe trailing behind him. His voice carried a quiet gravity. "Proceed with the evidence review," he said. "The court is reconvened." The lights dimmed once more. The projector flickered to life. The expert cleared his throat. "Your Honor," he began, "our team recovered deleted video fragments from the hard drive. It appears the data was manually erased approximately 2 weeks before Syra's death. We've been able to restore several seconds of footage." The defense attorney stood, already objecting. "Your Honor, that material is inadmissible until properly verified." "Sit down," the judge ordered sharply. "Let him continue." A hush fell over the room. The video began to play. The image was shaky, captured from what looked like a home surveillance camera at the top of a staircase. The frame flickered, distorted, fractured, but the sound came through clearly. Syra's small figure stood, halfway up the stairs, her back to the camera. Her voice, trembling but firm, echoed faintly. "Please, Daddy, stop yelling." A deep male voice responded, loud and harsh. "I told you not to touch my computer." "I didn't mean to, liar." The room froze. The father's voice filled the courtroom, raw, uncontrolled. His silhouette appeared at the top of the stairs, hand raised. Syra flinched. The next second, a blur of movement. She stumbled backward. The camera jolted, capturing a single, terrible sound, the thud of a small body hitting the floor. Then, static. Gasps broke through the silence like cracks in glass. The mother let out a choked cry and covered her mouth. The prosecutor closed her eyes, visibly shaken. Reporters lowered their pens, hands trembling. The judge looked pale. "Pause the footage," he commanded, voice heavy. The screen froze. Syra's last moment suspended in light and shadow. At the defense table, the father sat motionless, his hands clenched so tightly that the tendons stood out against his skin. A faint tremor ran through his arm. The defense attorney whispered urgently, but the man didn't respond. His eyes, cold, hollow, stared at the frozen image of the child he once called daughter. "Mr. Hale," the judge said, tone sharp, "do you have anything to say regarding this evidence?" No answer. The defense attorney stood in panic. "Your Honor, this footage may have been tampered with. There is no proof of continuity." The prosecutor slammed a hand against the table. "Tampered? You can hear him. You can see him. There's no mistaking what we all just watched." The gallery erupted. Murmurs, outrage, sobs. The bailiff had to shout for silence, but even that couldn't drown the sound of the mother's quiet, broken weeping. Mina sat near the front, tears streaming silently down her face. Her small voice trembled. "She didn't fall." Daniel turned to her gently. "What did you say, sweetheart?" Mina's eyes were locked on the screen. Her voice grew stronger, words shaking with grief and certainty. "She didn't fall. He pushed her." The courtroom froze. Every head turned toward her. Her mother let out a low, shuddering sob, collapsing into her lawyer's arms. The prosecutor pressed a hand to her mouth, fighting back tears. Even the judge's gavel hung suspended midair, as if he couldn't bring himself to interrupt that tiny voice. At the defense table, the father's mask began to crack. His jaw tightened, veins visible along his neck. "That's not true," he said, voice shaking. "She tripped." But no one believed him. Not after the video, not after that tone. The prosecutor's voice was like steel now. "You erased that file, didn't you?" Answer the question." "I didn't mean what?" He slammed his fist against the table. "She wouldn't stop crying." The shout echoed through the room, raw, ragged, then silence again, heavier than before, because this time no one needed to hear more. The words hung there, undeniable. Rex, lying near Mina's feet, lifted his head. A low growl rumbled deep in his chest, quiet but menacing, a sound that seemed to vibrate through the entire room, rate slow. It wasn't anger. It was something else. Instinct, protection, the recognition of guilt. Mina placed a trembling hand on his head, whispering, "It's okay, boy." But her eyes never left her father. The judge took a long, deliberate breath. "This court will recess to consider the charges in light of this new evidence," he said. His voice, though calm, carried the weight of fury barely contained. "Mr. Hale, you are ordered into immediate custody pending full review." As the bailiffs approached, the father's composure shattered completely. He stood, shouting, "It was an accident! She was clumsy! You don't understand!" But his voice broke halfway through, collapsing into something between rage and grief. The officers restrained him, his words dissolving into incoherent mutters. The mother sobbed openly now, body shaking uncontrollably. The gallery watched, some crying, some frozen, some turning away as if unable to bear it. Through it all, Mina sat in silence, her tears finally slowing. Rex pressed closer, his head resting on her lap. She ran her fingers through his fur, the smallest act of strength in a moment when the world itself seemed to fall apart. For a long time, no one spoke. The only sound was the hum of the projector, still frozen on Syra's last frame. A moment of terror and innocence, forever captured in pixels. And when the judge finally struck the gavel again, it didn't sound like a call for order. It sounded like the closing of a chapter, the collapse of lies, the beginning of truth. Rex growled one last time, low and steady, as if reminding everyone in that room. Justice was no longer silent. The courtroom felt like it was holding its breath. The air hung heavy with the weight of everything that had been revealed. The video, the shouting, the fall. Every word, every sound lingered in that space like smoke after a fire. The father, once composed, once confident, now sat with his face buried in his hands, his shoulders trembling under the scrutiny of the room. The judge's gavel struck once. "This court will now hear the final statements before verdict," he said firmly, his voice echoing through the tense silence. "Proceed." The prosecutor rose first, her face pale but resolute. "Your Honor," she began, "we've heard enough." Her tone was both sharp and grieving. A child's last message hidden away in a stuffed bear, a father's voice raised in anger, deleted footage showing the moment a young girl's life was taken. There are no accidents here. There is only guilt and fear trying to disguise itself as denial. The mother sat behind her, hands clasped tightly in prayer, lips moving without sound. Mina sat beside Officer Daniel, her small fingers tangled in Rex's fur. The German shepherd stayed still, every muscle taut, amber eyes watching everything, a quiet guardian in the storm. When the prosecutor finished, The defense attorney stood, visibly shaken. "Your Honor," he began, "my client," but the father cut him off. His voice came low at first, raw and uneven. "Stop." The attorney froze. The father slowly rose to his feet, hands shaking as he faced the courtroom. His eyes, once cold and distant, now looked hollow, broken. He opened his mouth, but for a long moment, nothing came out. Then suddenly, the words burst free, wild, uncontrollable, like floodwaters breaking through a dam. "She wouldn't stop crying," he shouted, voice cracking. "I didn't mean to." The entire room recoiled. The sound struck like lightning. The judge slammed the gavel down hard. "Silence!" But the man kept speaking, words tumbling over one another, filled with desperation and guilt. "I just wanted her to stop. I didn't mean to hurt her. She fell. I tried to catch her. I swear I tried." His knees buckled as he spoke, collapsing against the defense table, gasping for breath. "She just wouldn't stop crying." The mother screamed. It wasn't anger. It was pain so deep it seemed to tear through the walls. Her lawyer caught her as she stumbled forward, sobbing uncontrollably. Mina clutched Rex tighter, burying her face into his fur. The dog stayed firm, steady, letting her press into him, his quiet presence grounding her against the chaos around them. The judge struck the gavel again and again. "Order! Order in this court!" His voice trembled with fury. When the noise finally fell into silence, he looked down at the man before him. The father had slumped into his chair, face wet with tears, whispering over and over, "I didn't mean to." But no one was listening anymore. The judge's tone softened, but only slightly. "Mr. Hale," he said, "you took the life of your own child. Whether through intent or uncontrolled anger, the result is the same." He paused. The silence stretched long and heavy. Mina's soft sobs echoed faintly in the background. Rex lifted his head, ears twitching at the sound. His eyes focused on the judge as if he understood the gravity of that moment. The gavel came down with a resounding crack. "Guilty." A collective exhale swept through the courtroom. Half relief, half heartbreak. The father didn't move. The mother fell to her knees, crying openly, clutching her chest as though she could pull her heart back together through sheer will. Mina didn't look up. She stayed curled against Rex, her face buried deep in his fur. His steady breathing filled the space around her, a quiet rhythm cutting through the storm of sound. Bailiffs approached the father. When they touched his shoulder, he didn't resist. He let them guide him away, face blank, spirit hollow. The door shut behind him with a metallic click, the sound that closed not just a trial, but a lifetime. Slowly, the courtroom began to empty. Reporters packed away their equipment, whispering headlines with trembling voices. Lawyers gathered their papers. The gavel still lay on the judge's desk, untouched, the echo of its last strike still humming faintly in the air. The mother wiped her tears with a shaking hand and crossed the room to where Mina sat with Rex and Daniel. Her steps were unsteady, but her eyes, though red and swollen, carried something new: gratitude, fragile but real. She knelt beside her daughter. Mina turned to her, eyes red but clear. Without a word, the mother gathered her into her arms, holding her tight. Mina's small arms wrapped around her neck, and for the first time in months, she whispered softly, "Mommy." The word broke the woman's composure. She kissed Mina's hair again and again, murmuring, "You were so brave, my love. So brave." Rex sat beside them, still and silent. The mother turned to him, tears falling freely. Her hand trembled as she reached out to stroke his fur. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for finding her truth. The German shepherd blinked slowly, leaning slightly into her touch, then turned his gaze toward the now empty bench where Syra's image had once flickered. For a brief moment, it felt as though the air itself bowed in respect. Officer Daniel approached quietly. His voice was soft, almost reverent. You know, he said, resting a hand on Rex's back, sometimes justice doesn't speak. He looked at Mina, then at the mother. It barks. The words lingered in the air, simple, powerful, true. The mother nodded, her lips trembling into a small, tearful smile. Mina's tiny fingers tightened in Rex's fur, and for the first time, her breathing slowed, steady and calm. The sun had begun to break through the clouds outside, light filtering through the tall windows, spilling gold across the courtroom floor. Dust particles drifted through the beams like tiny sparks, fragile reminders that even after the darkest storms, there is light waiting to return. The mother and daughter stood. Mina crouched once more beside Rex, cupping his face in her small hands. You saved her, she whispered. You saved us. The dog blinked, then pressed his nose gently to her palm, right where the faint scar still lingered from the pendant's cut. It was over. Not the grief, not the loss. Those would take years to heal. But the truth had been spoken, and that mattered. As they walked toward the courthouse doors, Mina turned one last time. The empty room behind them glowed in the morning light, a place that had witnessed both cruelty and courage, both death and redemption. Rex followed close beside her, his shadow long against the marble floor, and when the doors closed, his soft paws were the last sound left, the quiet rhythm of a heart that had helped bring justice to life. The seasons had begun to change. The rain that once soaked the courthouse steps had softened into gentler showers, washing away the last traces of winter. Weeks had passed since the verdict, but inside Mina's small world, time moved differently. Some days stretched endlessly long, others slipped away like dreams she couldn't quite hold on to. The nightmares still came. Sometimes she would wake in the middle of the night, breath shallow, her small body trembling beneath the covers. In those dreams, the stairs were endless, and her sister's voice echoed faintly, calling her name, fading just as she reached for her. Each time she woke, her mother was there, holding her, whispering that it was over, that Syra was safe now. But Mina knew. The ache of missing someone never really went away. It just learned how to live quietly inside you. That's why Rex came. Every few days, Officer Daniel would park his cruiser outside the small house at the end of the lane. The sound of the car door closing was enough. Mina would peek from the window, and before Daniel even reached the porch, Rex was already bounding toward her, tail wagging, eyes full of warmth. Mina, Daniel would greet softly, smiling. He's been asking about you all week. She'd giggle, wiping her nose with her sleeve. Dogs can't talk. Maybe not with words, Daniel would reply, patting Rex's head, but he says plenty in his own way. The therapy room was small but bright, filled with drawings, sunlight, and the soft hum of an old clock. Mina sat on the rug with crayons scattered around her. Rex lay beside her, head resting on his paws, watching quietly. The therapist, a kind woman with glasses that always slid down her nose, spoke, gently from across the room. Do you still hear your sister in your dreams, Mina? Mina nodded slowly, coloring the outline of a dog with a bright yellow crayon. Sometimes, but she's not sad anymore. She just smiles. That's good, the therapist said softly. Maybe she knows you helped her. Mina's small hands paused over the paper. Rex helped her, she said matter-of-factly. He found the bear. He knew. Rex lifted his head slightly, as if he recognized his name. Mina smiled, reaching out to scratch behind his ears. The simple touch seemed to calm her. After the session, Daniel always waited outside, leaning against the car. "How's my favorite witness?" he'd tease gently. "I'm not a witness anymore," she said one day. "I'm just Mina." Daniel smiled. "Then you're the bravest Mina I've ever met." She thought about that for a moment, then nodded. "Can I tell him that?" "Of course," Daniel said. That afternoon, Mina sat in the backyard with Rex beside her. The grass was still damp, the air smelled of earth and flowers. She reached into her pocket and pulled out something small, Syra's pendant. It gleamed faintly in the sun, silver worn from years of love. Mina held it tightly for a second, then leaned forward and fastened it onto Rex's collar. Her fingers fumbled a little, but she managed to secure it. "There," she whispered. "Now she's with you." Rex turned his head, glancing at the small charm. Then, as if understanding, he lowered his head into her lap, letting her small hands rest on his fur. "You helped her tell the truth," Mina said softly, her voice trembling, but full of something new. "Peace. You helped me too." The dog's chest rose and fell in a slow rhythm. The steady sound of his breathing was like a lullaby, grounding, gentle, safe. Mina's eyes filled, but for once her tears didn't burn. They came like a quiet rain, the kind that cleans rather than wounds. Her mother watched from the window, hand pressed over her heart. The sight of her daughter laughing again, even softly, even briefly, felt like sunlight after months of night. Days turned into a new kind of normal. Mina began drawing again. Not dark, lonely sketches anymore, but pictures of two sisters under blue skies, of a dog with a shiny silver pendant, of a small house surrounded by flowers. When she showed them to her therapist, the woman smiled. "That's beautiful, Mina. Who's that?" "That's Syra," Mina said proudly. "And that's Rex. He's the best hero ever." The dog, lying nearby, gave a soft bark, almost as if agreeing. Later that week, Daniel stopped by again. He found Mina sitting on the porch, brushing Rex's fur with a small comb she'd borrowed from her mother. Each stroke was careful and deliberate. When she saw him, she grinned. "I'm making him handsome for his medal," she said. "His what?" Daniel chuckled. "The medal you said he's getting," Mina replied confidently. "You said he was brave." Daniel laughed softly, realizing she must have overheard. "You've got a sharp memory, kid." She looked at him seriously. "You said sometimes justice doesn't speak. It barks." Daniel froze for a moment, the words he'd once said echoing back at him. He nodded slowly. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I did, and I meant it." Mina smiled and continued brushing. The late afternoon sun painted her face in gold, her laughter mingling with the gentle breeze. For a moment, Daniel saw not the trembling child from the courtroom, but a girl learning how to live again. Fragile, yes, but blooming. Rex leaned against her leg, closing his eyes as she hummed softly, the same tune Syra used to sing when they played together. Mina looked down at him and whispered, "You can rest now, okay? We're safe." The dog gave a slow wag of his tail, a small sigh, and laid his head back down, content. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the sky turned pink and gold. the same colors that had once painted Syra's favorite drawings. Mina sat quietly beside Rex, her small hand resting over the pendant that now hung around his neck. In the stillness, she finally felt something she hadn't felt in months. Peace. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't complete, but it was real. And sometimes, that's enough. The morning sun poured across the courtyard of the city police headquarters, warm and golden. Rows of officers stood at attention, badges gleaming, while reporters waited with cameras ready. Months had passed since the trial, but the story of the little girl and the police dog who found the truth still lingered in every heart. Today, the department would honor Rex, the hero who brought light into darkness. Officer Daniel stood by the podium, pride and humility mingling in his smile. Beside him sat Rex, his fur shining in the sunlight, a temporary collar ready for what was to come. Near the front, Mina stood with her mother, her blue dress fluttering in the breeze. Her eyes, once shadowed by pain, now glowed with quiet strength. When the ceremony began, the police chief's voice carried through the courtyard. Today, we honor one of our own, a four-legged officer whose courage uncovered the truth when humans could not. His actions gave voice to those who could no longer speak for themselves. He paused, then smiled. For extraordinary service, we award K9 Officer Rex the Medal of Honor. Thunderous applause followed. Cameras flashed as Daniel knelt while the chief fastened the shining medal around Rex's neck. But then, a small figure moved forward. Mina. No one had called her, yet the crowd fell silent as she climbed the steps and knelt beside Rex. She wrapped her arms around his neck. The dog lowered his head, pressing it gently against her shoulder. "Thank you," she whispered, voice trembling. "You helped Syra and me." Her tears glistened in the sunlight, not of pain, but gratitude. Around them, hardened officers turned away, blinking back emotion. Mina's mother stood at the edge of the stage, hand over her mouth, smiling through tears. Mina held Rex's face in her small hands. "Some witnesses speak through words," she said softly. "Others through silence. But sometimes, truth finds its voice in the bark of a loyal heart." The courtyard stilled. Even the wind seemed to pause. Daniel swallowed hard, chest full of pride. Rex met his gaze. We did it. The moment was captured by cameras, yet no picture could hold what it truly meant. This wasn't just a story of bravery. It was about the unheard, and how something pure and wordless could make the world listen again. When the ceremony ended, officers approached to pet Rex, shaking Daniel's hand. "You did good, boy," the chief said, scratching his ears. Later, as the crowd thinned, Mina crouched beside Rex once more. "It looks like Syra's pendant," she said, touching the medal. "Shiny and brave." Her mother smiled. "She'd be proud of you both." Daniel knelt beside her. "Most people spend their lives trying to be brave," he said, "but you already are." Mina smiled faintly. "Rex taught me how." As the sun set, the medal and Syra's pendant gleamed together, duty and love side by side. Mina whispered, "It's okay now, Syra. We're okay." Rex walked beside her, steady and sure. At the gate, Mina looked up. "You were right," she said. Daniel met her gaze. Rex gave a soft huff. "Sometimes justice doesn't speak," Mina finished with a smile. "It barks." And together, the child, the officer, and the dog, they walked into the fading light, their story forever alive in every heart that listened. When you look at a dog like Rex, you remember what loyalty really means. It isn't loud or showy. It's quiet, constant, and always there when you need it most. German Shepherds, especially, have this way of understanding more than words. They carry a kind of wisdom in their eyes. They remind us that love doesn't need language, just presence, patience, and heart. Stories like this aren't just about courage or justice. They're about how deeply animals can touch our lives, how they heal what people sometimes can't reach. If you've ever looked into your own dog's eyes and felt that silent connection, maybe take a little time to learn how to deepen that bond. There are wonderful resources out there, not commercial, just heartfelt, that have helped people grow closer to their dogs. In the end, that's what it's all about, isn't it? Listening, loving, and letting them remind us what unconditional really looks like.